Hello, good day. So our topic for today, this is part of our government accounting. So now our topic for this period would be the government budget. So page 1. Let's proceed. So for this subject, our learning objective is number 1, to be able to define government budget. Number 2, to be able to identify the objectives of budget. 3, to be able to determine the components of budget. And 4, to identify the procedures and different sources of government budget. So what is government budget? So government budget, let's first define budget. What is budget? So budget is a plan to show the amount of money a person or organization will earn and how much they will need or be able to spend. So meaning, di ba everyday naman, nagbabudget tayo. We wanted to determine magkano ba yung income natin, tas magkano yung expenditure natin para malaman natin kung sasapat ba yung kinikita natin sa day-to-day expenses natin or yung monthly so that we would be able to save and be able to divide the money that we have in our daily activities, in our monthly bills. So, ini-spread natin sila. So, yung government, ganun din. So, usually, the government budget is a document prepared by the government and or a political entity presenting its anticipated tax revenue. Kasi di ba sabi natin, sa taxes kumukuha ng pera yung government. So, doon na pupunta yung mga binabayad natin tax. And the proposed spending and expenditure for public purpose for the coming fiscal year. So, si government, at di ba naririnig nyo sa mga news, meron tayong tinatawag na budget call or budget hearing. So, doon, piniprepare na ng mga government, yung dalawa, yung mga earning na government, kung magkano yung dapat nilang ma-earn, tapos yung mga different government na pinifinance or sinasubsidize lang ng government, nagagawa din sila ng mga expenditure nila. So that they would be able to know what are the revenues and the expenditure of the government over the year. Pati yung mga projects ng government or yung mga IRA per different barangay or for different municipality. So that they would be able to know kung magkano ba yung dapat spend or kung ano ba yung mga activity na gagawin ng isang government dun sa separate places. Next, we also have the objectives of the government budget. So, number 1 is the reallocation of resources. So, yung reallocation of resources, kasi ginagawa natin sa government, we reallocate resources by what? By making it stabilize. So, parang, ang gagawin, halimbawa, itong resources ng lugar na to, kailangan dun sa kabila. What a good example is, a certain government agency have this property that are needed to a certain entity. Halimbawa, yung mga land, maraming land, halimbawa, itong isang agency na to, pwede yung ibigay sa kabilang agency para ma-utilize into public purposes. Or reallocation of resources. For example, they collect taxes so that they would be able to build bridges, roads, infrastructure para sa day-to-day or para mas mapagaan pa yung buhay ng mga mamamayang Pilipino. Next, this is also reducing inequalities in income and wealth. So, di ba, ito rin yung pinaka-basic reason why people who earn more are taxed more. So, kung mapansin mo, yung mga tax table natin, these are in schedular form, wherein those who earn more need to pay more taxes. Kasi nga, ini-stabilize yung mga resources natin. Kaya yung ang nangyayari, yung mas maraming binabayad ng mga wealthy people, napupunta yan doon sa mga public projects. Like, for example, the hospital, the public education, kasi nga nire-reallocate para nang sa ganun, yung mga resources na para dun sa rich, mapunta rin dun sa iba so that yung mga inequalities mapapantay. Okay, another reason for this is the ayuda. So, they give ayuda to the less fortunate people or children so that in the future, these less fortunate children will be able to become earning citizen or profitable to the entity. Mapapakinabangan din ng gobyerno. Hindi kagaya ngayon ang nangyayari, sinusuportahan lang sila. So this is the reason why the government needs to budget or why we have some priority projects. We also want economic stability. Dito kasi sa economic stability, kung mapapansin nyo, the government is borrowing some finances para lang ma-stabilize yung economy. Kagaya ngayon, pandemic, nanghiram yung government or ni-reallocate niya yung mga ibang resources niya para nang sa ganun, yung mga nawalan ng trabaho will be able to have the money in order to still to sustain their day-to-day living. Kaya lang kasi sa economic stability, sometimes, kaya nagpapas ng mga bagong batas or ng mga bagong tax law para nang sa ganun, ma-stabilize natin yung economy. Halimbawa, a good example of this one is the train law, wherein yung mga income or yung mga earning entity, ang ginawa nila, tinaasan yung tax exemption. Pero, kung mapansin mo, yung mga afford ng mayaman, like cars. So, tinakso ng mas mahal, so that they would be able now to reallocate resources. So, yung mga people lang who will be able to have the money to buy the cars, sila naman ngayon yung magbabayad ng mas mataas na tax. So that the government, dahil na iba or na-interfere, na bawasan yung income nila, napunta naman sa iba. So this is why we have the economic stability. And then, management of public enterprises. So, syempre, di ba, alam naman natin na yung government, since yung mga public enterprises, wala naman masyadong kinikita yan, sinasubsidize ng government. Like, for example, the NHA, yung national housing, binibenta nila lang mas mura yung mga property sa mahirap so that these poor people will be able to have a place of settlement. So, may kakaroon sila ng mga sarili nilang bahay. So, what is budget cycle? So, budget cycle, number one, it would usually start in the preparation or budget preparation. Under budget preparation, each government entity will provide their estimated expenditure and revenue. So, dito nakalagay kung ano ba yung mga i-expense ng government for the year, tsaka kung ano yung dapat nilang kitain. Next, we also have the legislation. So, kapag napasa na yung budget preparation, gagawa na ng batas to approve. Ito yung naririnig nyo na tinatawag na budget hearing. So, after the budget hearing, they had to depend each expenditure and revenues being used by the government. So, under this one, the bill would now be passed under the General Appropriation Act. So, pag napas na yon, so meron ng isang libro, then this become the law, and this will now become the budget of the government for the entire year. Next, we also have the budget execution. So, kapag meron ng GAA, mag-execute na. Ito na yung process kung saan yung agency by which the financial resources are made available to the agency and are directed and controlled toward achieving the purpose and objective which the budget approves. So, meaning, dito na, mag-expense na yung mga government. Kasi under the budget executions, dito meron ng cash or NCA or Notice of Cash Allocation so that the government projects will now be able to meet or be able to procure and produce the necessary expenses and deliver the goods and services that are due to the people or to the public. So, dito na yung budget execution. Meaning, kung walang GAA, hindi pwedeng basta mag-budget execute. Kasi wala pang pera na pang bayad doon. Unless, sinabi ng president na gagayahin na lang yung budget from the previous year. Kasi minsan may mga ganong nangyayari kapag nakulang na yung time or hindi sila nag-agree with the budget. Okay, so yun yung budget execution. And then lastly, the budget accountability. So under the budget accountability, dito naman papasok si Commission on Audit. Why? Because they need to check whether the budget is being used within the law or within its limits. So under the budget accountability, the act or requirement to record the reasoning behind or the decision when preparing the budget. So dapat kasi malaman nila or ma-identify nila bakit kailangan mag-expense ng gano'n. Kasi lalo na yung mga infra. Okay? Next, we have the different components of budget. So, meron dalawa. We have the revenue budget. A revenue budget is a forecast of the company's sales and expenditure including capital-related expenditure. So, yung revenue budget, so si government, meron din siya. Although wala siyang sales masyado, but the sales revenue now become the taxes revenue of the government. And then the expenditure, these are the expenses incurred by the government, including the related capital expenditure. Ano ba yung related capital expenditure ni government? These are the infrastructures or yung mga buildings, yung mga magagamit ng tao for more than a year. So, in accounting, these are our property, plant, and equipment or the non-current asset. Next, we also have the capital budget. So, the capital budget is the process that the entity undertakes to evaluate potential project or investment, construction of a new plant or big investment in and outside the venture or example of the project that would require capital budgeting before they are approved or rejected. So, in short, si capital budgeting naman, ito naman yung mga long-term na activity na kailangan i-undertake ni government. So, for example, the roads, the bridges, the buildings. So, dito papasok yung mga capital budget natin or tinatawag din nilang capital outlay. Next, we also have the revenue receipts. So, ano ba yung mga revenue receipts ng government? So, number one is the tax revenue. And then, the other one is the non-tax revenue. So, under the tax revenue, ito yung mga taxes na kinukolekt sa atin. Yung mga income tax, or yung mga itatakal natin sa ating Taxation 101 or you could just check some videos with regards to that. So, yun yun. Ano naman yung mga non-tax revenue? So, ito naman yung mga interest. Kasi take note that the government also have their own banks. So, nagpapalend din sila ng money. So, there are also the interest. So, ito yung mga hindi taxes pero na-earn ng government. Like, yung bayad sa hospital, yung mga printing nila. So, any income of the government other than taxes. Next, we also have the capital receipts. So, under the capital receipts, ito naman kasi yung kapag kakulang na, ang gagawin ng government, maglo-loan. Halimbawa, recovery of the loans. Meron kunyari, may pautang sila, like the GSIS, the SSS, the Bangko Sentral, or the Land Bank. So, ito yung mga sa loan. So, yun yung and then sometimes, kapag kakulang na yung pera, ang ginagawa ng government, just like now, we do borrowing. So, nangungutang tayo sa mga World Bank or sa neighboring country natin in other receipts. So, other receipts, those that are not falling under our recovery of loans or borrowings. So, minsan kasi may mga overpaid salaries or overpaid benefits. So, kinukuha or binabawi din yun ng government. So, that would now form part of our revenue receipts. Okay, now we also have the budget expenditure. So, ano ba yung mga budget expenditure natin? So, we have, yung government, meron siyang tatlong expenses. Number one is the personal services. And normally, the personal services includes all the salaries or all the expenses incurred by the government with its public servant or dun sa mga empleyado nila. Kasi take note that the government number one activity is public service. So, kailangan ng empleyado. Next, number two is the maintenance, operating, and other expenses. So, ito naman yung mga expenses to meet the day-to-day expenditure of the government, like the light, the water, the supplies that they need to have so that they would be able to sustain their day-to-day activity in serving the people. And then lastly, the capital expenditure. So, ito naman yung mga long-term investment ni government, like the infrastructure projects ng gobyerno, the roads and bridges, the building, the schools. So, these are now the capital outlay. Next, we also have to measure the government deficit. Ano ba yung pang-measure ng government deficit? So, that would be, number one is the revenue deficit. It is when the surplus of the government expenditure over the receipt. So, ang nangyari dito, yung expenditure ni government mas mataas sa receipt sa mga kinikita niya or dun sa revenue receipt. So, ang nangyari doon, revenue deficit. So, ito yung formula. Revenue expenditure less revenue receipts. So, kaya merong deficit. Dito kasi government, hindi pa natin na-attain yung fiscal adequacy or yung sumobra yung income natin kesa doon sa expenditures. Next, we also have the fiscal deficit. This happen naman when there is a distinction between the government total expenditure and total receipts, and this also include the borrowing. So, ang nangyayari sa gross fiscal deficits, yung total expenditure natin mas mataas pa kesa dun sa revenue receipts natin at saka sa mga inuutang natin or inuutang ng government para ma-finance yung day-to-day activities ng government. Next, we also have the primary deficit. So, the primary deficit naman is when the money of the government required to borrow apart from the interest payment on a formerly borrowed loan. So, dito naman, ang nangyayari kasi, di ba, meron ng gross primary deficit. So, meron na tayong una na fiscal deficit, yung kung saan yung total expenditure natin, pag minus natin yung nakolekta ng gobyerno, tsaka yung mga inutang natin, kulang pa din. Dito naman, negative na nga, meron pa tayong mga interest na binabayaran. So far, nandito pa tayo. Okay? So if you have any questions, please just comment it below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you like this video, please help me reach out more people by hitting the subscribe and the like button below. God bless you.